Hello, welcome back to our channel, Get Legit LLC. Thank you for joining us. And having regard to all that transpired over this weekend involving Melody S. Holt and her ex-husband Martel Holt, as it relates to the most recent having to do with a tape recording of his daughter. I've decided to let's explore and see the legal issues having to do with that recording. And so the question lurking in everyone's mind, was Martel Holt legally wrong to record his daughter? And so let's delve into it so our viewers could appreciate the law in Alabama as it relates to recording of a minor. Welcome again to Get Legit LLC. Here you have our disclaimer as it relates to fair use. The fact of our making these videos is for educational purposes. However, we notify the owner of these copyrighted materials if you feel as though we've not used this document or this information on the fair use. We ask that you communicate with us, and you can see our email address on the screen. We're a new channel. We're trying to grow. We're at, I believe, 37 subscribers. And so I ask you all to please subscribe to our channel so we could produce more content from a legal perspective with all things happening in social media, on reality TV, and in the entertainment industry. Well, let's get to it. And so, recording a conversation, one party consent. It says here, there are two primary concerns when recording another person without their knowledge or consent. First, are you violating their rights, opening yourself up to civil or even criminal liability? Second, even if you are not violating any legal rights, are your recordings admissible in court? If you can't use the recorded conversation as evidence, there is little reason to record, at least from the perspective of your divorce case. Here, this document is talking about divorce case, but it could very well work in this scenario for having to do with custody, where Martel and Melody is before the court in a custody battle. So it says here, you would not be able to record a conversation between your ex and another person, such as a suspected extramarital paramour. Alabama law makes it a criminal offense to use any device to record communications made via wire, oral, or electronic means without at least one party to the conversation agreeing to be recorded. And so that is what you call the state of Alabama is a one consent state. Here it says without at least one party to the conversation. So Alabama is a one state, which means only one person to the conversation needs to consent. So an example would be, let's say Martel and Melody is having a conversation. Martel on his own, without informing Melody, without asking her consent, decides he's going to record it. Because Martel is having a discussion with Melody, that means in Alabama, it is legal because Martel himself, the maker of the recording, is a part of it. And so he himself consented to it. So in other states, you would need the person who is being recorded in the conversation as well as the recorder to both give their consent. And so in a state like Alabama as well as New York, one party consent. But what governs in a case such as this where Martel recorded his 10-year-old daughter? And so, as you see from the previous slide, it says that it could be a criminal offense. And where it's a criminal offense, that's where the Alabama codes come in, having to do with eavesdropping. And so, let's go now to the conversations or what would then consider to be eavesdropping. It says here, if you are a part of the conversation, then you should be in compliance with the one-party consent rule. If you are recording your ex separately, such as trying to record them meeting with a paramour to prove an affair, you need to ensure you do not violate their right to privacy or criminally trespass. And so for those of you who would have seen that old recording Martel posted with Melody and a gentleman at a restaurant, then something like that, you could say, okay, fine. He was not the one who is in the recording. It's a gentleman and Melody. And so in that case, you would say he is violating Melody's and that gentleman's rights to privacy, which could include a criminal trespass, and then brings up the law as it relates to eavesdropping. However, it says there's always exception in the law. And so it says, typically, if you are recording the person in a public place, such as a park, hotel lobby, or in this case, they were at a restaurant, which is a public place, then the person being recorded does not have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And so that piece of legislation in Alabama the eavesdropping law would not be adequate. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't bring a case or charge, but I don't believe you'll be successful given that where that recording took place, even though Melody and that gentleman would not have consented to it being recorded, they were in a public place. And so being in a public place like a restaurant, they would not have expected there to be any privacy. So this is a picture of Melody at the restaurant. And so being in such a public place, Melody would not have expected that there should be some level of privacy, which again goes to the argument that, hey, that was a meeting. Look, Melody has on her scarf. Everybody dressed that way for a meeting where you're interested in the individual. It could very well just be a business meeting. But the point is, Melody was no longer with Martel. However, to get to the issue as it relates to him recording his daughter, his 10-year-old daughter, there are several cases in Alabama having to do with it. One of the cases that I looked at is Pollock and Pollock. And it says here, in Pollock, the court held that the secret recording of a 14-year-old girl's telephone conversations with the non-custodial parent by a custodial parent within the custodial parent's home was permissible if the consenting parent demonstrated a good faith, objectively reasonable basis for believing such consent was necessary for the welfare of the child. And so, Alabama being a one state, and there is what we call vicarious consent, whereby because Martel is the father and the minor child was with him, Martel vicariously consented to his 10-year-old daughter's recording of that conversation. And so what the court will look at is to see whether or not when he recorded his 10-year-old daughter, whether or not he did so in good faith and an objective, reasonable basis. I mean, when we say objective in law, you mean a situation where a person, any onlooker, anybody can look at it and say, oh, that is reasonable. He believes something wrong was happening to his child. He believes his child was in danger. And so an objective, reasonable view of what he did would say, okay, he acted in good faith. And so he had an objective, reasonable basis for believing such consent was necessary for the welfare of the child. In my previous videos, we talk about when matters are before the court for custody, that the court will make decisions in the best interest of the child. And so a decision as to whether or not a father, in this case Martel, would have exercised his vicarious consent in recording his 10-year-old daughter was done in one, good faith, that it was objectively reasonable basis. He had an objective reasonable basis for believing that such consent was necessary for the welfare of his child. So I will not be the one to sit here and say whether or not that is the basis, whether or not he meet that threshold. But it is for you, the viewers, and if this matter is taken to the court, if there's a complaint, then those are some of the things the court will be looking to see. It says here that after Pollock, several other federal, district, and state courts have considered the question, and most have ruled that the custodial parent properly consented vicariously to the recording of their minor child's conversation when the recorded was motivated by a genuine concern for the child's welfare. And so, people, it's for you all to look and see whether or not Martel had a genuine concern as it relates to his 10-year-old daughter and the other children's welfare. I know you would look at it and say, he just wanted to know Melody's business. And as much as we will have our own position on things, my purpose here with these recordings is to say what the law is so we could start to look at things with a legal twist to say, okay, I believe Martel was wrong for doing what he did. He should not have recorded his daughter. However, what is the law saying as it relates to him doing the recording? Was he legally right? Did he have the jurisdiction to do such? And based on what we've seen so far, because as a parent, he had a vicarious consent. So he consented for his daughter to that recording. But what the court will look to see is whether or not that recording was done in good faith, whether or not he had a objective, reasonable basis for believing that it had to do something with the welfare of his daughter. So he then went on and do the recording. Then there was another case, Silas and Silas. In that case, the court held that under Code 130.13a to 11-31a, a parent may give vicarious consent on behalf of a minor child to the recording of telephone conversations with the other parent where that parent has a good faith, objectively reasonable basis for believing that the minor child is being abused, threatened, or intimidated by the other parent. And so from these two cases, you all could see that what the court is looking to see is whether or not that parent who recorded, exercised that vicarious consent, did so in good faith. When we say good faith, we mean that they had no bad intentions. And so I know most of you will look at it and say, we know Martel, his intentions never good. And so the court, but in this case, the court will look to see whether or not his intentions, it was in good faith, and whether or not he had an objectively reasonable basis for believing that he had to record his 10-year-old daughter. And that basis will come from what was said, what was being asked. Let's say in that video, Martel was asking his daughter, and so did mommy beat you? Did mommy punish you? Did mommy did this to you? That was not the case. He merely wanted to know what the mother said as it relates to the reason why the family is no longer what it used to be. And so the site I got these information from went on to talk about the legal aspect of recording minor children. It says, the legal side. It said, but, so what I explained is the legal side. What I explained is how the law looks at it when it comes to whether or not the recording was done in good faith, whether or not the parent who exercises vicarious consent had objectively reasonable basis to believing that the child needed that to be done for the child's welfare. But the flip side to that is there are more important questions, namely, what is the effect on the child or children? The Washington Post says kids these days don't even need to be taught how to engage with video recorders. They do it intuitively on their own social media channels. But this is different when kids have their own YouTube channel. They know it. When kids are recorded by adults who intend to use the recordings in a court battle, that will have an effect on the child. Some of the effect it went on to discuss is the effect as it relates to whether or not the child will want to continue having conversations with that parent, whether or not the child will be able to then trust that parent that you ask me something, I might see it as being a genuine question, but what is it that you're going to do with the response I give to you? Am I always being recorded when I'm with you? So it deals with the element of trust. And so we could very well see where young Malia, 10-year-old child, could very well start to have some level of distrust for her fathers as it relates to what else have you been recorded. And so it could allow, open the room for a child to then start to act differently because they don't know if they're being monitored. They don't know if everything they say will be taken to social media, taken to the court, be used against their mother. And so it's a bad precedent bad example that Martel is setting. And then further, the BCB reports that kids behave differently when they know they are being watched. Is recording any different? Imagine how uncertain you would be if you understood that sometimes you're being recorded and sometimes not. But you will never know when you're being recorded. So that position that Marta will now put his children in, where they will not want to disclose things to him because they don't know when they're being recorded. So it is really a sticky situation that he has put those children in. And here I have the source where I gathered the information from. It was a quick research because I wanted to jump on here and explain to my listeners and viewers really and truly what is the legal position as it relates to Martel recording his 10-year-old daughter. Again, I ask you to hit like and subscribe to our channel. It's a new channel we're trying to grow. We have a very small following, and so we would like to put more of this kind of content out, and we ask you to just support our channel. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.